Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of From the Command Post. We are here live from our public safety training school to talk to you guys about another incident that was of interest. This one took place in our 3rd Battalion a couple of months ago. And today you're going to hear about this 18-hour incident that involved some propane, right? So today you're going to hear from the incident commander, a couple of the supporting casts, about their actions, and hopefully educate all of us on some propane. So before we get started, as always, we have a couple of housekeeping things we need to talk about. Just remember, if you're a CCO and you're still in need of some COPDI credits to sign in, make sure you put your fire service ID and your last name on there. If you have any questions, as always, today you can email me, right, Raphael.Gibson@montgomerycountymd.gov, or you can go to the chat, and we will make sure your questions get addressed. So 2023 Command Comps season is coming to an end. I appreciate all of the hard work of everyone that was involved in putting that thing together, especially during my first season of Command Comps. We gotten some really good feedback on the little bit different session that we had, right, scenario that we had. I'm trying not to talk too much about what the scenario was about, but so I'm really grateful and for all the supporting cast, the dispatchers, the evaluators, the group that helped me put the thing together, and for everyone that participated and gave us feedback. So thank you guys for that. COPDI hours, right? So if you still need COPDI hours for the year, please send me an email. We're in the process of uploading some of this content, some of the 2022 season Challenge in the Streets from the command posts into Fire Rescue 1 Academy. So if you need hours, please send me an email, and I'll make sure and assign you guys some assignments so you can complete that. So for 2023, we have a couple of projects going on that I'm going to need your help with, right? So first of all, in 2023, I want to kind of bring back some live in-person instruction. So if you have a topic that you would like to present on for 2023 COPDI season, please send me an email so we can get you guys on there and we can start setting that stuff up. Lastly, and before I turn it over to Chief Cooper here, we're also starting a leadership book library up at the Training Academy for everybody to use. So if you guys have some leadership books that you have, just collecting dust over in your study there at home and you'd like to donate them to the Training Academy, please just send me an email. We're in the process of creating that. There will be one here at the training school, and there's going to be one at Fire Station 6, which is going to be managed by Captain Smith. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Chief Cooper here, who's going to be the moderator for today, and we'll get the episode started. Chief Cooper.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to start by introducing our panelists today. And I'm going to move from my right. Captain Mike Weimer, Safety 700 on the A shift. Captain Ray Sanchez, Station 7 on the A shift. Captain Paul Neal, Safety 700 on the B shift. And Battalion Chief Brent Hopkins, Battalion 3 on the A shift. So with the introductions being made, Brent, I think I'm just going to pass the baton to you, and let's start the day.
Yeah, I think we should start off with, just because it's a propane leak from an in-ground tank, that we start off with some basics on propane. We have a PowerPoint presentation for that, and Ray here will take over with that and talk about propane when it comes to company-level officers, not the hazmat level, but the company-level officer, and what they need to know and what they're looking for when we first get there.
Perfect.
All right, so thank you. And I'm on C shift at Station 7.
Oh, I'm sorry. My mistake.
Anyway, propane. So as you look at it, there's different cylinders that, propane takes different shapes and forms. It can be above ground, it can be below ground. The propane tank in question that we ran was a below ground 1,000-gallon propane tank, propane cylinder. So the important thing to note about propane as it relates to emergency response, one, it's heavier than air. It's transported in the liquid state. So in the liquid state, it's not flammable, but when it vaporizes, that's when it becomes flammable. And so if you have it and you have a liquefied sludge, as you sometimes see it coming out, it's not necessarily flammable, so you really don't have to worry about that. But once it gets to the vapor property, then that's where you're looking at the flammability of a 4, which is the highest you can go on the UN symbol. It does have some health issues if you're in a confined area, and the only thing that it reacts with really is some strong oxidizers, so it's not really reactant with anything else, but you can also smell it. So the safety factors for our standpoint, emergency responses, we know that it's heavier than air, and what it does is it follows the path of least resistance to areas below ground, and oftentimes it can get like Chief Hopkins and I were talking, if it were in a city type thing, it could go down into sewers and then take that path. So it can be very dangerous, as it was in our scenario. We'll go over that in a little bit. So we just took on a different animal. It floats in water, and it'll settle in air, and it'll follow low-lying areas. I'm not going to give you a propane thing per se, but go ahead to the next slide. All right, so the ERG guide is pretty generic as it relates to a propane thing, and oftentimes it's a little bit exaggerated, but it'll give you the initial safety factors in place so that you can start making decisions to protect yourself and others. The important thing to note is you do not, if you have a propane leak, you don't want to, and there's a fire, you don't want to put it out. And the reason why is because then it'll just turn to the vapor again, and then you have another problem. If it's on fire, it's not necessarily going to be something that explodes. I know you all have heard of BLEVE, but that's usually when a fire is encroaching or is on the tank itself. But if the gas itself's leaking, you don't want to put it out because you know where the gas is. So that's something to think about. Initial actions for a tank leak, same as a lot of the calls are a hazmat incident, isolate, deny entry. You want to determine the best, safest access, and that's going to be upwind, uphill. Use your meters. Your meters are your best friend. With any chemical or propane or gases, we have the meters that tell us that it's there, and the concentrations that it's there, how much of it's there. It'll give you a good idea, and then you can establish your hot, warm, cold zones. For us, 10% of the LEL is when we establish the hot zone. 20% is when even the hazmat people get the heck out. We start backing out. So that type of stuff is what you're looking at. So when you look at it, the important thing too is you need to know what your meters say. You hear people oftentimes, like if you're talking parts per millionth, parts per billionth, or whatever, your meter's reading parts per millionth. You hear people often referring back to command and saying, I have 10. 10 what? What are you showing 10 on? So it's important to know that, especially in a propane or a natural gas, we're talking propane today, but you're looking for the LEL. And the LEL for propane is between 2.5% to like 9.6%. So in between that zone, the lower explosive limit and the higher explosive limit, that between 2.5% and the 9.6 is where you can get the flammability or spontaneous ignition if you have an ignition source. So the other thing is with this is you want to try to get rid of as many ignition sources as possible that it may travel to, and identify that. So that's part of the command stance that you take, and that's an assignment that you would make somebody start doing. Again, you want to look at whether or not a liquid or a vapor is leaking. Attempt to control it if you can. Have your hose line protections in place, because if you have a vapor, all you can do is knock it down with water. So if you do approach a tank, if you have the knowledge how to shut off a valve or whatever else, you can do it under the protection of a fog, fog stream, if you will. And that'll knock down the vapors for you enough to have access to the tank, even if you're doing an assessment. If the tank is damaged and not able to control the leak, then just evacuate the area and wait for the hazmat team. And we'll get into a little bit later on what it is I'm looking for as the HMO, because we did it on this call. Contact the owner of the tank if you can get it, whether it be Suburban Propane, AmeriGas, or whoever else it is. Those are the people you want to get there, because they really are the subject matter experts as far as the tanks themselves. You want to know as much as you can how much product's in the tank. I'll give you a quick shortcut. If you have an exposed tank, we didn't have the luxury of that on this call, but you can use your thermal imager, and that'll give you the line of delineation because it's cryogenic inside the tank, the liquefied propane, and so there'll be a line where the air above it is going to be a little bit warmer, and then the cryogenic or the liquid propane is going to be below that line. So you know you can do it with a thermal imager and see about how much you have left. If it's underground, you ain't going to be able to do that. So if you can, check with the homeowner. How old is the tank? Do they know why and where it's leaking from? I'll give you a quick tip on that too. Homeowners don't always know what they have. They don't know how much they have. They don't know what it is. They just know that they pay somebody to come out and fill it, and maybe they know the company name. So that's stuff that you need to take into consideration when you get there. Don't always take the homeowner's word as gospel. These are the different types of tanks. If you look at number F, that was what we were dealing with underground. In Potomac, it was 1,000 gallon. We got told at that time that it was a 2,000 gallon or a 1,500 gallon. And we didn't necessarily believe that, but, we got verified later on that it was a 1,000 gallon tank. Go ahead, move. And we already went. Those are the underground tanks. You go back. No, the other way. Sorry, thank you. So that's just some ideas of what the piping is. You have the relief valve. The relief valve oftentimes is where most of your leaks are going to be coming from. Sometimes the regulator will get some, you'll see that sludge that I talk at is like brownish. It really smells a lot because the mercaptan that propane's mixed with smells like kind of like rotten eggs. Or I find it sometimes to smell like onion grass or something. It doesn't, not necessarily rotten eggs. But it is ethyl mercaptan that propane's mixed with. But those are the valvings that you're looking at. And, most of the time, you got your fill valve. So sometimes after they've filled it, you can have leaks out of that. The relief valve, in the summertime, we get a lot of calls for that because the relief valve does what it's supposed to do. If you have a propane tank and the sun's hitting it, the liquefied propane inside starts to expand and create vapor and goes out the relief valve. And it tends to smell a lot, so people get scared by that. But it's actually operating the way it's supposed to. Nevertheless, if they smell it, they're told to call us, and that's a good thing because it may not always be functioning appropriately. You got your regulator that regulates the pressure of the gas, from the liquid state to the vapor state, and then into whatever it is it's providing service to, whether a generator, stove, or your home. All right, go ahead. And we talked about the valving, and basically you're going to see different valves for different types of containers. Generally, they hold the same configuration. You got the fill valve, the vapor return valve. Your fuel level gauges, you can't always go by those either because they tend to freeze up or they're not serviced appropriately. So it may show that, and you look at it, it may be full, but it may not. So, you just do your best to find out when the last service was as far as how much they filled it with. Go ahead. All right, this is the ones that we see the most, and those are the ones that service the basic, barbecues and stuff like that. So oftentimes, too, some of these are serving some generators, so, some household generators, but it doesn't do anything different than any of the others. It's just the amount of gas that's, or liquid that's in it. Go ahead.
That should be all the slides for that.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yep.
All right, so if there's any questions, I don't know that you do that, but...
Yeah,
Yes,
so
sir.
I thought that was really good. Thanks. It was helpful. So I have two questions based on a couple things you said. You mentioned the liquid leak looks like a sludge.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like?
So it comes out looking like a brown, you know what it looks like? It looks like a brown Slurpee.
Okay.
Because it comes out, it's cryogenic, and it just, sometimes you'll see it like crawling down the outside of the tank, and it reeks. I mean, you can touch it, and it smells like I said, the onions, or you get that rotten egg smell. But basically what it is, that's the liquid leaking out. And it doesn't necessarily, depending on the time of day or type of leak that it is, turn to vapor right away, and you'll just see it on
That's what I was going to ask you.
Right.
So at what point does it morph into a vapor, or will it stay in a sludge form for a while?
All right, to my knowledge, and this is just off the top of my head, it will if the ambient temperature allows it to melt, which it will because it's a cryo. So if it gets warm enough to turn, change properties, so you change from a liquid to a gas, ambient temperature is gonna do that.
And there's not much risk of it in its sludge form, right?
In its sludge form, in the liquid form, it is not flammable.
Okay.
But if it's vaporizing, it can be flammable.
And here's a simple question that I'm sure most people are afraid to ask. The difference between the 20-pound tank that's attached to most people's grills and then these massive size tanks that sometimes power structures, right? What is the difference in risk aside from the obvious? Meaning, is there cause for concern in a 20-pound tank?
So, yeah, I mean, all of them. It's extremely flammable. If it's, let's say there's a fire on the, like we often have, we have fires on the decks, fire on the outside. A fire impinging on a propane cylinder increases the internal pressure, turns that liquid to a vapor, which increases the internal temperature of that tank, which can lead it to fail. That's the BLEVE that you hear of. And that's that boiling liquid
Sure.
expansive vapor explosion. But what it does is it allows that tank to potentially fail. So our priority on something like that
Cool it down.
is just to cool it down.
Yeah.
And the bigger tank, underground, we don't have the luxury of that. Above ground, because there's more, well, we can get into the expansion ratio of propane. The expansion in other words, if you have, it's like 270 to 1. So 1 gallon of propane, once it turns to vapor, will expand 270 times from its original form. So it expands much greater than what you have, in the liquid form inside. So, and that's how it spreads. That's how it goes, and it gets out. So, 1,000 gallons of that turning to, a 270 to 1 ratio and getting outside the box. It's, what's the word?
Exponential?
Thank you. Exponentially.
I just made that up.
It's a perfect word. Exponentially more dangerous.
So I guess my point, the reason why I asked this question, what I want to get out and put out there in English is, while performing your risk assessment, whether you're the first due company officer or the command officer that gets there a little while into it, do not discredit the 20-pound propane tank.
That's a very good point. Yeah, well, I never discredit any flammable gas.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that was an excellent presentation. Any other questions on the presentation?
So I've got two. Can you explain to us the difference between the hazmat meter and the meters we carry on our trucks? Because I know that 10% is not really 10% on our meters because they're burning something different to calculate propane, correct?
So-
The meters?
Yes and no. I think everything now is what used to be different. I don't know on the engines, to be honest with
Ventus?
you, and that's bad, but it's calibrated to methane.
Methane.
And so methane is basically what you're detecting when you're detecting propane. It basically is a methane. You have your AIN. But unless I'm completely wrong, I think it is the same. We just have different other things that we're able to detect on our meters, like hydrogen sulfide and in some cases cyanide, where you don't have that luxury. But you're reading to the same ratios of a 1-to-1 that, you have that potential on your meters as well as we do.
Any questions from the chat at all? All right.
So this is how I want to move now. Let's, why don't you start at the very beginning of the incident? What was it dispatched as? How did the battalion chief end up going? How did 2 safety officers end up going? Hazmat team? Sorry about the C shift thing. You just work every day. I got confused. Do you mind starting from the way beginning? And
Well, do you want to start with the dispatch? Listen to the dispatch and go through that and listen to the dispatch?
Yeah,
Let's start with the dispatch.
What I want to accomplish, though, is I want the assumption is that no one knows anything about this call.
Yeah.
Because it's unique, right? It's unique in
Very
nature, and there's people watching right now saying, why am I watching about a propane leak with a
Yeah.
battalion chief and a couple safety officers?
Yeah.
Could we explain something on that real quick? I think it'd be important.
That's why you're here. Explain whatever.
So this call, from looking at it, would seem very mundane. It would, to some, be very boring. From the standpoint of command and from the standpoint of hazmat and even to safety, there was a lot of challenges. And the challenges were decision-making, risk-benefit analysis, the utilization of crew resource management, and then coordinating with the other powers that be, like MDE, with Suburban Propane, with a homeowner, and, the stuff that, we were talking about. It was one challenge after the other. So, while it took a long time and it was boring, there was a lot at stake. And that, I think, is what we're trying to get to you today. So as you watch this, take it from that standpoint, and then we'll show you how it escalated and then it didn't. and the decisions that were made together, and it worked very well.
Yeah,
I think you found a new moderator.
I think the other thing too we have to understand is that the dispatch didn't give much information, right? So we're going to listen to that in a second, and it's just a regular old, broken outside gas service.
I never heard the dispatch,
So I think we'll listen to that now if we can.
but it sounds like a gas leak. So the frontline officer's thinking maybe a natural gas leak.
Yes.
And he gets there and he has what he has, so.
13,513 Esworthy Road, cross street, Quarry Mill Road, broken gas service. Currently, engine 731, respond 7 Alpha 1, lots here, 3122, 1330.
So single engine response, right? The normal broken outside gas service dispatch. The unit officer going down the road is automatically thinking, I've got his right up here where his water supply is, because it is a non-hydrant area. What he needs to do to get there, when he gets there, what he's going to call for next, and just the surroundings, the time of day, the day of the week it is, all those fun things that he's going down the road with. And then he gets there and he finds something different. Doesn't, you're expecting to find just a propane tank that's on a gas grill or something attached to the house that's leaking from there. He doesn't expect to find what we find here. And do we have that picture? Can you show the picture of the truck on top of the tank? We have to run through it all. So this, as they arrive on scene, this is what they see.
So what is that? Somebody's front
It's a
yard, back
personal truck. So we'll get in those pictures in a minute, but that's what we found when they get there. It's the backyard is a truck sitting on top of something, and that's it, just sitting there. So if we back up and start off with the day, we can actually give some the very first slide. So here we are. It's a typical day, 65 degrees. It was nice and sunny out, 40% humidity, and the winds were important here. It was 8.9 winds from the west. So next slide, please.
So what's that? What would you categorize that? Slight breeze, right?
Slight breeze. It was a little gusty that day. The gust got up to about 10 to 15, but it's a steady breeze at that time. It's a big house. When you get there, this is what you first see coming down the driveway, which is a long driveway. There's 3 other houses on this driveway. 61,000 square feet, 6,100 square feet, sorry. 6 bedrooms, 5 baths. So it's going to have a lot of whatever when you get there, it's going to have a lot of gas doing something. There are other structures on scene. So first initial look, if off to the delta side is where you would have the garage, and that's where you're going to find the truck when they get that way. Next slide.
Go back real quick.
Yeah.
Right there, if you could see that little mulch area right there where the lights are, that's where we parked. And so while we were parking there.
At the top of the driveway.
Yeah, if you look on the delta side by the driveway, the delta side over there was where, we would go and look at the truck or whatever. But back here, we were getting strong concentrations of, you could smell it. You could smell the propane really strong back there. We weren't getting any readings on the meters, but we were smelling it. That 8.9 wind that Chief talked about was important because for a propane leak that big, it was a large propane leak, it couldn't have had better conditions because the humidity was low, the wind was there, but it was ever-changing because the wind was ever-changing. At that point, it was at the west, but it kept.
So not being funny, were you on the first U engine or were you on the hazmat unit coming in, the 7?
So that day, I was on engine 728.
Okay.
The hazmat was at a dog and pony show.
But you weren't the first U engine,
I was not the
which
first.
is an important part of this conversation.
Yes, it
Yep.
is.
Yeah. Okay.
And the first 2 engines did exactly what they're supposed to do. They get there, they arrive at the scene, they make sure that they're taking it all in to find out what's going on and get all the questions they have to get answered.
So I'm going
Great on scene.
to keep interrupting you, and I apologize.
That's fine.
I was trying to paint a picture. So when the first U engine got there, again, all of us would have done the same thing, assuming, construction company hit a gas meter on the side of the house or
Yep.
whatever, right? So to me, the logical thing to do would be to pull down the driveway and look for someone doing the help me dance, right? A contractor or somebody,
Yep.
right? So what did they do? Where did they arrive? What did they see when they first got there?
When they first got there, they pretty much saw this. I believe that the
They
homeowner
didn't
was
see anything then. They saw
really nothing, because I think the homeowner, there was a language difficulty there going on with the homeowner. The husband who was driving the truck was kind of like, hey, I hit this thing, and was trying to be in the background. The wife was very vocal about everything when I finally got
So
there.
someone was out there saying, help me.
Someone finally got there and kind of was pointing, but they weren't doing
Okay.
the help me thing. They weren't running around. From what I understand, this guy tried to move that truck off that thing for a good 5-10 minutes.
Before
was
he
stuck
called.
on it. Before he called 911. He was stuck on it. That truck wasn't moving. So he wasn't able to move the truck. So if we go to the next slide, I wanted to show just the whole point of this is the elevation, how quickly this house goes from a two-story to a three-story in the rear, and the elevation even drops down farther from there as we're going down farther in the background. The rest of the pictures don't show the elevation, but this picture is just to show you that that backyard drops off pretty quick.
And the Delta side, where the pickup truck is on the left side of the house.
So it's on the left side of the house there, and the pickup's actually the backyard, which is on the Charlie side, but that's where everything goes on. We go to the next slide. So real quick, the closest hydrant was out, I think, on Seneca. So they're pretty far back there, and this driveway is huge. So there's, like I said, 3 other houses on the driveway that they had to get back to, and they were the last house in the back. Next one. Again, just so you see it there as you're getting back through it, and then the next one real quick. So with the way the wind was blowing, it was blowing towards the line, towards that back house. So we have Esworthy, that house that's off in the back upper right corner there. The wind was blowing in that direction, right? That's 300 football fields away, down a hill and up a hill through Muddy Branch Park. Yeah. So in reality, what was going on and where this was going, we were pretty okay. I'm not saying safe, but we were pretty okay. So the engine company got there, they evaluated the scene, they went inside, they metered the house, they got everybody out of the house to make sure nothing was going to happen, and they started isolating the power to the house so they wouldn't have ignition points. And after that, they called for the hazmat team.
Was there any migration into the house?
They had zeros in the house, so nothing going in the house. So luckily, again, the wind was worked for us. This next slide here, you can see the red little dot there I put in. That's where the tank was and where the truck was sitting. And the next closest house to them, uphill, upwind, was, I think, I can't read it from here, but I think it was like half a football field. And
so at this point, they realized via the homeowners and their investigation that they were dealing with an underground large-scale propane tank.
Yes, because they were told at first this tank was 2,000 gallons by the homeowner, right? And then, again, the communication error was very difficult because it was a language barrier going on. And the wife was very upset while the husband was trying to stay away from it all. So you get to the backyard, you see the deck that we can see in that picture of the elevation, and all you see is this truck sitting there. Now, disregard this is my picture of later on that has the tow company there, but that's all we see. There's nothing else going on. There's no vapors, there's smells there, but there's nothing else, correct, Ray? I mean, I wasn't there at this point yet.
Yeah, it's when we got there, well.
So you guys, 28, part of the hazmat complement, got there before?
Yeah, so he called the engine company, Lieutenant Pierce, who was working overtime, called for a hazmat team and wanted to notify the battalion chief only.
Okay.
I got the notification. I walked to the safety officer and said, let's take a ride. Let's just go out there. Right? Not dispatch. Let's go out there and just put our eyes on this thing and talk to the guys, see what's going on. And so that's when Ray was there before. The hazmat got there before I did because we took our time to get there. They were dispatched at 1:30. The hazmat team was dispatched around 1:50. And then we rolled in later than that. So Ray was the first one really on the scene that's sitting in the panel.
And Ray, did you guys have any conversation on the radio prior to your arrival, like sometimes we do, or you just...
With who?
With the 31 on the scene?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
So there is video with the sound in the background of it off-gassing.
Ah.
So you could... Oh, go ahead. You.
So just a comment from Chief first, right? It says the Ventus meters on the heavies is calibrated for natural gas. The MX6 meter on the hazmat units and on paramedic engine 720 can be made to detect the propane LEO with a correlation factor. The take-home point is that the LEO of natural gas and propane is not the same for the first arriving unit officers.
Got it.
Yes,
Yeah.
I thought that was about 16%. So
Yeah.
we're reading 10, but it's actually like 16. So thank you for that point. I'm glad we got that.
Yep. That's what I said. I didn't know.
So I interrupted you when you started to say he called for the hazmat team.
He called for the hazmat team. We do have that. We do have some audio of him getting everything set up because he called for a hazmat team. He called for an engine and a tanker at that point because he was by himself and he wanted to get some water there. So he called for that. We have that audio. We have the audio that him just setting it up. Hey, stay out in the hard street. Don't come back down here because again, the driveway was a windy driveway. In fact, just in front of the house, you almost do a 90 return to get down to the house twice. So do we have that audio fired up?
13,513 Esworthy Road, cross street, Quarry Mill Road. Just says Permanent Kitchen 731. The broken outside gas service. Hazmat 728, Permanent Kitchen 730, tanker 731 respond. Operate 7 Alpha 3, clocks here 3122.
Keep on going, 7 Alpha 3.
31 on Alpha 3.
Agent 731, will you need an operator on Alpha 3?
No, no need for an operator. I'll call you on 1 if we need anything. Just have all units coming to this down Alpha 3.
Okay, sir. 1346.
Permanent Kitchen 730 to Permanent Kitchen 731. Is your tanker didn't get up? You need to bring our tanker.
Montgomery 2, engine 730, tanker 731 en route.
Is my microphone hot? So that's a good heads up on Joe Bell's part. I haven't heard something like that before.
To my tanker and engine 30. You just stay out on Esworthy, and we'll let you know if we need you back there. Thursday.
And 31 took the tanker just because?
So 31 brought the tanker. I guess the medic unit dropped down
Staging on
with the
Esworthy.
tanker
It's good thinking.
because that was dispatched out there. I mean, Lieutenant Pierce did a great job when it came to the initial setup for this thing.
I'm just trying to take up some of the silence with the
Yeah.
conversation.
I understand. I don't know when it ends.
Well, it ends when you don't think it's valuable for them to hear.
So I think we're good now, right?
Okay.
So, Engine 731 did a lot of good things there. They got there. They figured out they were too close. They backed the engine up 300 feet away. They grabbed the 4 homeowners and they moved them out 500 feet away. They went inside and they started metering and isolating anything that could be potential ignition sources. The one thing that Lieutenant Pierce wished he would have done earlier or figured out earlier was there was a generator on the house that was run by the propane. So as soon as you kill the power to the house, that generator says, wait, I got to turn on, and that generator fired up. So they immediately shut the generator down, and that's when kind of Hazmat and everybody else started showing up for them to start discussing what we're going to do next. Again, the only good side of this whole call when it came to the location was they were on the backside of Muddy Branch Park. There was nobody back there. It was
Right.
a vacant area. There was the creek down there that this could go sit in and sit on top of the creek, but it was downhill and downhill. It was 50 feet to 100 feet drop from the top of the house down to the creek bed by the time they got there. So, and this thing sounded like a jet engine when I got there.
Oh, you know what? I think that's extremely valuable. Can we play that, please? Do we have that? Paul, you said. So where is the person recording the standing at this point? So people out there understand how loud this gets.
So this was the guys from 31 on scene. They're right there on side Delta on the driveway area.
Okay. So on the asphalt. So they're
Yes, yep.
so 100 feet away?
75 to 100 feet away.
Okay. And that's clear. That sound is clear.
Yeah.
Okay, so
It was loud.
You hit it good.
yeah. So
So when they were asking initial stuff, there was some confusion, but the homeowner, the wife, said that they had just got the tank filled. So they had just paid. Now, this is where I think the confusion came from. I think she was saying $1,500 for it to be filled, and we interpret it as 1,500 gallons. So that's where that confusion started. And then Ray was there before me, so Ray would have more insight on the whole interaction between the homeowner and Engine 731 and their reaction before I got there.
So it sounds like from the arrival of the initial company, the company officer did a really good assessment of what was going on. And in doing so, the recon really garnered some great information.
Mm-hmm.
And then, not only that, but knew how to react and knew what to ask for.
Yeah.
Great job, right?
Oh,
So, go ahead.
No, so he did, and his crew did a fantastic job. And so we met with them when we first arrived on the scene, and he basically just told me what they had, and we walked me to the back. And so I took a look at it, and, like you just heard, I could hear that walking down the driveway.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. I didn't expect to see what I saw. So when I saw the truck parked on top of the piping, because the dome, you could see, was kicked up about 4 or 5 feet in front of the truck, and you could see that he had gone over and tried to come back, and gone over and tried to, and so I was like, how that didn't go up, I don't know, but because it was, I don't know how long they'd been driving that car or what the temperature of the engine was at the time or whatever, but that would have been a perfect scenario to blow up. But, or maybe it was too rich, I don't know. But, like I was telling you, Chief, when we got here, I said, just when you think you've seen it all, no, you haven't,
Right.
So I looked at it and I was like, to be honest with you, in my head, I was like, I really don't know what to do.
And you're the subject matter expert.
Right. And
You're the
so,
one that we look to for help.
Absolutely. And so I was like, I just kept looking at it, and I did a circle check of it. And at that point, I got a hold of the emergency number for Suburban Propane. I said, I can't go under here. I can't put anybody else under here, and I'm not going to. I said, because, for the reasons we've already stated, it was the perfect scenario to not do anything, except we had to just refer it to Suburban Propane to come out and MDE. I contacted MDE at one point.
It was the perfect time to slow down. It was the perfect time
Right.
not to make any rash decisions about how we're going to fix this thing, because we didn't have a problem. It was a problem, but it wasn't a problem, right?
Yeah, no,
It
I'm
wasn't
glad
going
you said that.
anywhere. We weren't having to evacuate full buildings of people because this propane wasn't going far away. And so we were able to take a breath and discuss our options.
Okay, so you said we a few times. So before Brent got there, that's when you walked around and said, I got to think about this one.
So the way I look at things, and it's not, I'm not saying me, but for every, like I'll say HMO, everybody has their own way of doing things. You have Chief First, who's an HMO, you got Ivan, you got whoever. And I teach this when I teach, with the guys and gals, but I always tell them, I believe in crew resource management because I don't always see everything, especially on a hazmat call. I have an idea of what I want to do, doesn't mean it's right. And so I like to get everybody, even from the lowest ranking firefighter up to whatever. That was our strength, actually. But when I was there with the officer off the engine, I told him, this is what I'm going to do. And I said, I'm not committing any personnel. We don't need any more personnel. I was like, this is the perfect scenario to have a propane leak if you're going to have it. The car is off. We made sure of that. It was turned off prior to my arrival. So I was looking for the ignition sources. He dotted all the checks, and I was like, great job. So we sat there, and I just said, I need to call for help, meaning the specialists, the experts, who own that. But I asked myself, what's at stake here? And really, I didn't have an answer. There was nothing at stake unless it just blew up or caught fire or whatever else, and I didn't see that happening right away. But it's certainly, everything that was going on wasn't worth committing personnel to go in there and do anything. That was my decision. Yes, sir.
So a couple of things, and there's a lot of chat going on over here in the chat. So, but a couple of questions that I'm going to kind of reword a little bit. So the decision not to have an operator on Alpha 3, can we expand on that a little bit? What was the thought process behind that?
I couldn't, because I didn't say anything to the operator. It wasn't me that was talking on that. That was Lieutenant Pierce at the time. Again, I believe because of what the situation was going on, the fact that we weren't had anybody in immediate danger, the weather was cooperating with us, and where this thing was going and what it was doing, he didn't feel he needed the operator at that point. And that might also come back to just normalcy, right? We're trying not to give ECC to tax them by having an operator just stay there when there wasn't much talking, because the audio we have is about the audio we have.
There was a lot of sitting around.
There's not a lot of audio there, so I can't comment on why Lieutenant Pierce decided to say I don't need an operator, but those are the factors that I would put in my head, saying, I don't really need an operator right now. So
Yeah, I'm also hearing a lot of assessment, scene assessment, size up, and risk management that was going on. Was that kind of like the initial, once Captain Sanchez got there, did you guys have those risk assessment and scene size up conversations, or was that something that was ongoing?
it was a constant scene assessment, right?
Yep.
As we get into this more, we went over every option to see what we can do to mitigate the situation, and is mitigation what we need to do? So we run into a couple of those questions, and then the scenario plays out even farther, right? So we get there.
I called Suburban Propane, and Suburban Propane couldn't find anybody to come out.
So
So they didn't have anybody. And I was like, we're out here with a 1,000-gallon tank, and I need you, whatever. And they said, well, we'll try. And then finally they got a hold of somebody, and they said it's going to be a minimum of 2 hours. That 2 hours turned into 3 hours. And then the kid that got there was a tech. He wasn't anybody. He had no authority, no knowledge or whatever. He told me what I already knew. And I said, you need to get somebody out here who knows this stuff right now. And he called his supervisors probably, I swear to God, 10 times. And they kept saying, we can't find anybody, can't find anybody. Long story short, probably almost 6 hours into it. But I called Chief Hopkins at the point where I knew it was going to be 3 hours before anybody else was coming. I said, Chief, you got to know what's going on here because we're going to be here forever. And I contacted eventually MDE.
So we're getting ahead of
So
ourselves.
one last question that came in here from Chief Sniffen, and I think it's a risk management assessment type of question. If the truck had not been on top of the tank, would the hazmat team have been able to stop the leak?
I don't know if we can answer that because the tank was more damaged as the truck came off. So I don't know if, and then again with the leak that we had at 20%, they're backing out. So I don't think we would have been able to do anything without professionals there to kind of mitigate more.
But I will say this, if they did, and I didn't get the opportunity to do it. In other words, we do have the equipment to stop those leaks. We do have the knowledge to stop those leaks. But I never got the opportunity. In other words, you'll see as this goes on and as we finish out, why. But we just didn't have access to it. So I, even to this day, don't know exactly what the damage was to the top of the tank. But if it were exposed, I could have done an assessment and gone up and said, yeah, I can do this, or maybe I could turn this, or maybe I could patch that. I didn't have that opportunity.
And we'll get into that too, because MDE does show up on the scene at one point. That's farther along than where we're at. I mean, I'm just getting there now along with safety, and we're having conversations about what our next step is.
So as far as tactics go, there wasn't any reason for a charge hand line or water flow just to protect. Okay. So in the spirit of time, right, let's talk about, at this point now, the battalion chief got there, safety officer sometime around the same time frame. What did you do when you first got there? And then based on what you heard from the subject matter expert, I'm assuming the two of you collaborated on a plan going forward. What was that plan and why?
I'm going to say this, I'm going to interrupt. This was the neat part of this. And this is something the chief talked about because...
So it was a constant communication. It was, I walked up, I wanted to get my assessment by myself first to see what I could see that might be different than what they were seeing. In the end, it was exactly what they were seeing. We had a truck on top, blowing gas out, and we were in a relatively safe area to have conversations and to slow this thing down. At that point, safety, Ray and I talked about what we're going to do. And what we're going to do is wait.
Three of you guys.
Yeah, the three of us discussed on just waiting for Suburban Propane to get there because we couldn't go near the truck to do anything because of that. And the reason we didn't go near the truck was because we were in a relatively safe area, right? It wasn't going anywhere. I think that's the most important thing to pull out here was we could slow this down because it wasn't mitigating anywhere that could have had ignition sources or injured people. So there was conversations about, well, what if we do this? What if we do that? And I can't remember every what ifs, but there were a lot of what ifs once those guys got there. So Suburban Propane got many phone calls. This tech that came out was 3 months in the job or 3 weeks. It was one of those two things. It was a relatively young guy. He gets there and he pretty much can come out and help you reignite a lighter, right? That's what his job would be to do. And he, like Ray said, he couldn't get a hold of anybody. And this is a Sunday at Suburban Propane, which we have Suburban Propane right in Montgomery County. And it was a long wait. And we waited and waited and waited. And so much so that we sent truck 731, the spare engine, which was 730, and the tanker home. At one point, I sent engine 731 home to go eat because I had engine 728 in the hazmat there because we were waiting that long. Prior to that, we discussed lifting the truck, actually lifting it with airbags when Suburban Propane got there with their real techs. how we're going to do that. And to do that, I called out.
Oh, back up.
Yeah.
So we decided.
One of the scenarios was, yes.
So, okay, I just want to make sure people watching understand. You weren't talking about lifting the truck because you guys are getting tired of waiting.
No.
You were collaborating with Suburban Propane at that time.
We were discussing what we would do to assist Suburban Propane and what we could
Not
do.
with
Not with
Suburban
them, just
Propane, yeah.
ourselves, that if when Suburban Propane got here and they needed this truck moved off this thing, how are we going to do that?
Okay.
How can we do it safely?
Okay.
I think it's important too that, on the initial, we went out there twice. On the initial time we went out there was a plan, we were gonna do nothing, we were gonna let a natural event. We leave, the battalion chief and I leave. It's 4 hours goes past when Ray makes a phone call, hey, we've been here forever, I can't get a hold of anybody. And that ratcheted up a new game plan, which preempted us to go back out.
And so when we were back out, I called for a rescue squad and a truck company out of 31 to come down and evaluate from a distance whether or not that lifting that truck off of that tank with airbags and doing it safely could be possibly done. That those two unit officers decided that, yeah, we could do it eventually if we had everything in place.
So, again, to be clear, I want to define safely done. Does that mean safely done where we're not going to lose control of the vehicle? Or safely done is there's no risk of igniting the vapor?
So we weren't
Didn't
sure.
know
It was both.
It was both.
Okay.
At one point, I wanted to roll the truck and just let it roll down the hill because I wanted the truck off the thing so we could stop it. And the other point was we could probably jack it from the other side, slowly lift it enough to get somebody underneath there, a technician, not one of our Suburban tech, underneath there to go
Okay.
and see if they can crimp it.
I just want to be clear and not put any
We were
false.
not in a go pattern at all about anything. We
Okay.
had no equipment there to do the go.
So the beauty of it was talking with the chief and Mike and whoever else showed up. We were just looking for options. So that way we had a plan. In other words, neither one of them were great. Neither one of them were something that we were really going to pull the trigger on. We were just saying, if we have to, could we do this? And one of them, I called one of the large tow companies. And I'm not going to put names out because this guy's, fantastic. But he said the statement to me, he goes, so you have an active propane leak? And I said, yes, sir. He goes, I'm not putting my guys at risk.
I guess that's why I'm asking this.
Yeah.
It's like, when we first started this thing at the beginning, it was everyone did everything right. We have time to let this thing run its course.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, Suburban Propane was taking
Right.
advantage of that. What changed where you were trying to get all these different?
So these were just scenarios for us to come up with. Can we do this?
For
No,
what, though?
just in case we had to do something, in case something changed, in case the issue changed where now it's mitigating, the wind changes, now it's mitigating in the homes.
Okay.
If when Suburban Propane got there, they needed some assistance.
So
to
if
stop
you
it.
needed a call to action,
Yes.
you wanted to be ready.
I wanted to have different
Have
plans in
something.
place.
But
and
you weren't even
There was-
considering.
No.
The truck and the rescue squad went home after they were done saying, yes, we think we can do something safely down
Cool.
there. That was the second step after the first step was call a tow company and see if they can just wrench it off.
Yeah.
And we'll deal with whatever we wrench off as we go, with a fog stream or fans, whatever we can do to mitigate any kind of potential fire and then deal with it from there.
So
These
if
were all
the tow
scenarios.
truck company owner had said, yeah, Ray, we're good old boys. I could do that for you. Would you have let him do it?
I don't know if I was
Okay.
there.
No.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
So no,
Option.
it was an option
got it.
that when Suburban Propane got there, we thought were techs coming with trucks that showed up. This kid, the first kid that showed up in his Honda Civic.
Yeah.
Right. So we were expecting people to show up and say, you've got a 1,000-gallon at least tank leaking in this backyard. We need help here to come out and take care of this thing. They sent a tech, and it was the only kid on call.
Yeah.
So just to say real quick, one of the things the reason why we came up with those plans, because at one point, in talking with Suburban Propane, or that kid, as well as MDE, we were looking at maybe if we just let it off gas, which it did turn out to be, it could be 15 to 20 hours.
I was going to ask you, do you hazmat guys have a formula on how long it takes for that thing to?
There is a formula, but I don't know what it is off the top of my
Well,
head.
I'm glad you don't because it doesn't make me feel as bad.
Right. No, I mean, I'd have to look it up. But yeah, there is. But generally, a tank like that, you're looking at 15 to 20 hours,
Okay.
depending on the leak. And I couldn't look at the score on it. I couldn't see what it is. I could hear it.
Yeah.
I knew it was going really well, but I don't know. But either way, we were looking at committing personnel there in some way, shape, or form for that period of time. So we're looking for options.
I get that, but again, I'm going to reiterate, and then we got to move on.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm going to reiterate. I don't care if it takes 5 minutes or 20 hours,
Right.
the risk doesn't change.
Doesn't.
No, these
Okay.
were
Absolutely.
just plans to talk about if we had to do something.
Got it.
If we had to go, what plans could go.
Got it.
And we were learning that the tow truck plan was a no-go. So now we had to fall back to the next plan, which our own people, equipment, going things, and would we go there?
And I think that's one thing we'd have to discuss later on or as we finish this, because sometimes the best thing to do is nothing.
Yeah.
And that's something as firefighters, we find it hard to do. And, so you're always looking, but the decision not to act was paramount on this. And it was very important, and we all agreed on it.
Good.
So,
Listen, just about daybreak, so just about the time that the sun was getting pretty close to on the
Monday.
horizon. No, yeah, Sunday. This is Sunday. Still
Sunday into Monday.
It's
Dave.
going into
Well,
evening
I'm sorry,
now at this
day,
point.
nighttime, so.
Okay.
Sunset. The tech finally shows up, the guy. He shows up in shorts, a Carhartt jacket, and I think some sort of boots or no, I think that might have been like slipper moccasins. At one point, the guy gets underneath the truck. Like, he just walks up into it and does what he thinks. So those techs, they do their thing, and we stayed back on that one. It's like, hey, be ready in case this thing happens, because if this guy walks up there and something happens, we need to pull him out. And there was more discussion with him about what our capabilities are and what we had discussed beforehand.
So before he climbed under the truck with his moccasins, was there a discussion of, hey, I'm going to go do this?
Yeah, yes. So we found a mirror for him inside the house. So we could kind of mirror it up and see what was going on. So we could kind of flash the mirror in there, see what he had going on.
Okay.
But it was just like the Washington Gas. Those guys show up and they jump right in the hole, and they start going at it. So he had that subject matter expert. But that's how he showed up in his own personal vehicle. No big
But
trucks.
did he instill confidence in you like the Washington Gas do?
He did, in the sense that
because he had the knowledge.
Yeah,
The
okay.
second guy.
Yeah.
the second guy.
Second guy.
The first guy was just nothing.
But
The
I
second
gotta-
guy,
I do
the old
gotta-
guy that showed up, had the knowledge, had the experience. I've done this before. I haven't seen this, but I know what's going on with the tank, and I can get in there. We still didn't know what size tank we had.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it out there, and I talked to the chief again about this, and I said, this is something that I learned on a call that I messed up on. But that's our scene. And we let a guy go in there in moccasins and shorts.
That's why I was asking what I was asking.
No,
You guys-
and I'm like, if you better put something better on before you go crawling around underneath there. Not that that's going to save you if it blows or whatever, but that type of thing, because it's our scene, we're responsible. If something happened to that guy, guess who's in trouble?
Me.
We are.
yeah, well, those
And so those decisions, oftentimes when them contractors come, we got to be aware of.
So yeah, that would be the one thing that I would take back is letting that guy kind of enter
Yeah,
the
me
scene.
too.
One question we have here, was this tank owned and supported by Suburban Propane, or was it owned and supported by another company?
It was Suburban Propane who just filled it. I don't know if they installed the tank or if they knew anything about it. I wasn't able to get a hold of them to
makes a difference.
get some more information about the tank and how old it was, how long it had been in the ground, and that kind of information.
They looked it up. They
They-
took responsibility for it.
And
They were
yeah, because
servicing
it
it.
was their tank, right?
They were servicing it since the homeowner had taken over and were filling it, but neither Suburban Propane or the homeowner was able to tell us what size that tank was on a Sunday, right? So that was the other thing too, that this Sunday is what turned out to be the nemesis of getting people there.
Sure.
I mean, at one point in the morning when we showed back up, there was a guy that came from someplace in Pennsylvania in his truck. He showed up down there to take care of this thing. To move it along, talk to him about what the fire department could do or not do. We talked about the fact that we might be able to help them in the morning because it had gotten dark, lifting the truck, because I wasn't doing anything at nighttime. We're done. We're done for the night. We're just watch this thing. MDE showed up. That guy was not happy with that plan, right? He got underneath the truck also, ran down there, again, didn't put any Nomex on, just got underneath the truck and started looking around. He thought the relief valve was the problem, and he could crimp it if we could lift the truck 4 inches. And I fought with him about the fact that we're not doing anything in the middle of the night. The guys can't see, it's on the slope, we're not gonna do that. We're not putting people in harm's way, and he was not happy with the fact that we were just gonna let that thing go. And in the end, the plan was Suburban Propane is gonna sit all night on that tank, and we're going home. It wasn't going anywhere. And that might have been a fault of mine not to say we need to leave an engine company sit here all night long and rotate engine companies out there. But I thought at the time, because of where we were and what we were doing and where it was going, and the wind had died down, and we had 0 readings of where we were in the driveway, and we weren't smelling it as much anymore. Yes, it still was off-gassing, it still was blowing out, but it wasn't coming at us. to say, Suburban, you guys got to watch this all night. And they were going to charge the homeowner the cost of one tech sitting there all night, and that was that kid had to sit there all night long from when we left around 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night till we got there the next morning.
Okay, so why'd we go back the next morning?
I told them to call us back if they needed our assistance in the morning, and they called us back. So I was force held the next morning for 2 hours. So I was the instinct. I knew I was going to be force held. I told the guy it'd be me coming back. And that's when we get into the whole next day, because really nothing happened after that, right? I sent Ray home. I sent everybody else home. Suburban Propane understood that every 15 to 20 minutes they'd be out, checking the area, meter in the area, and calling us if anything changed. Calling 911 so we can come back at that point, so we can come out with our meters and our hazmat and reevaluate the situation. Before I left, the 2 homes that were closest, I went to both of them, explained to them what was going on, explained to them that if they were to smell gas, to call us right away, but that because of where it was going and what was still blowing down, that they shouldn't have a problem, and they didn't. They didn't even know we were there, the one homeowner. So,
Yeah. So I'm not. I don't want you to take this the wrong way at all. I'm asking this question so we all learn from this.
Yep.
And that's the value. At least the value for me of this program is, hey, these are things I identified that I wish I had done differently or better, and here's why. So I don't want you to take this the wrong way.
I won't.
Your decision to remove fire and rescue from the scene, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I don't know enough about this call to judge, but was fatigue and or frustration any part of that decision at all?
On my part, no.
Okay.
I wasn't tired at that point. I had eaten. I hadn't eaten yet, but I was okay at that point. There were 2 things I wish I did differently. Leaving one of our personnel there.
That's for the end.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
And I never really established command or sat in my car. This is all standing around talking, right? The car was up the driveway. It was far enough away. It would have been not difficult talking to radio the whole time because we had channel 3 to our usage, but it was all face-to-face stuff. So that's why there's no real audio, because there was no conversation on the radio at that point. I never really established a formal command post.
Right.
And didn't sit in the car and run through the check sheets and the actual, the actual command chart to say, what am I need to do? Because those do give you, sitting there, in my mind at least, gives me more of a command presence where I say, I got to think about the whole picture as opposed to just thinking about the guys going home for the night and sleeping in their beds.
How about while we were there? Because how many hours total were we there before we left? It was 7 hours?
Dispatch was
left,
like,
one.
Yeah,
I left about 9.
9:30, 10 o'clock. We were all out of there.
So how many hours did I?
9 hours.
9 hours,
Good
okay.
9 hours.
So it's an extended incident. Did we have a safety plan? Did you develop a safety plan?
Not at this point, no, because we weren't doing anything.
Okay.
No, so
No, that's a good answer. Why? Because we weren't doing anything.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think you gave us a good amount of information for the original call. Let's talk about the next morning,
Day
right?
2.
I'm assuming the 2 of you you didn't have anyone to pass on with. But I'm assuming the 2 of you had a conversation because were you part of the conversation? Hey, call us back.
I was listening. I was standing there when the chief talked.
Okay. So did you pass that on to Paul?
Absolutely. We talked about the entire call.
Okay. So and I know you pretty well. Did you happen to get in the car and drive down there just to take a look?
So, so that morning after Mike and I did the pass on, I was going out to check. Chief Hopkins came out and said, "Hey, we got to go back." And I was like, "Go back."
Did they call you on the cell?
They call me on my cell because I gave
Okay,
them my
they didn't
cell.
go through the 911
Just
center.
Give me a holler if you need us. And so that's where I went in. Chief Reed was working at the time. So
Okay.
I went to him.
Yep.
Chief Nelson, who was the chief the night before, Demetrios wasn't working, so Chief Nelson passed on to Chief Reed a little bit out the call. I went to him and said, "Hey, this is what's going on. We're going to go out there. They might need us help lifting the car up so they can get to this thing. If we can do this safely, all that fun stuff." Chief Reed said, "I want a written safety plan." Okay,
Oh.
I'll go get Paul and I'll go tell Paul what's going on. And I got a hold of Paul and we ended up in his office having a conversation because it was safety had said, "No, we're not doing that at all."
That was my plan.
That was his plan, was not doing anything. He told me no. So we said, okay, let's go talk with Chief Reed. And we ended up in Chief Reed's office.
But a safety at this point for Chief Reed, right? And he's all about the doing the right thing IMS stuff, right?
Yep.
The safety plan for what? We weren't there.
So, right, that was
For when we go back?
When we go back.
Okay.
What was our
for
safety
when
plan?
we go
Just to
back.
be clear.
The things we're going to do when we go back there and assist them
Okay.
in mitigating the situation.
Okay.
So it was some conversation between me and Paul and Chief Reed at the time about this, that, and the other. Paul was adamantly against doing anything from a safety
Why is that?
standpoint.
Well,
Oh, anything tactically, you mean?
Right.
Not against doing a safety plan like Chief
Oh,
Reed
no,
does.
tactical stuff.
Okay,
Tactical
yeah.
stuff, lifting the car,
Yep.
going out.
And you held your ground, right?
I did.
Because that's not easy to do, especially with a battalion chief and a dude chief if they disagree with you.
Yep.
Right? There are challenges involved with that.
I'm used to it.
Oh,
Okay. Hey.
Right. But, so Chief Reed did one of those things where he put it on the Teams meeting,
Okay.
and Chief Bailey then intervened, and then basically Chief Reed, and kudos to Chief
So
Reed.
let me interrupt you there.
Yes.
Was there a problem that the operations chief got invited to attend the meeting?
So the Chief Reed put it on Teams, and Chief Bailey inserted himself at that point
Yes.
and said, hey, because so the way that goes is we're having a conversation, and Chief Reed goes, oh, Chief Bailey's there. We're all need to go
Okay,
out
I
there."
must not know how.
So Chief
yeah.
Bailey went to the scene direct, and then Chief Reed, myself, and Paul all went out to the scene.
Oh,
By the time
okay.
we got there in the morning, Chief Bailey was already there
Yes.
and evaluating and talking.
Well, he must have known about the amount of hours you spent the night before,
Mhm.
and as the ops chief, right? One of his things is to know what's going on. He probably
Yep.
slid on down there, check it out. And, okay, that sounds
So that was
logical.
So that's when we all get down there together. Again, Paul was adamant about nothing tactically going to happen. I looked at Paul and said, I've got no skin in the game. If we say no, then it's no. I'm not worried about this. We let it sit all night long. It can continue to blow off. It's not causing any issues at this time. So I wasn't arguing for let's do something. It was, okay, that's great.
Yep.
I don't believe I looked at you and gave you
No.
a stern look or a dirty
No.
look or anything like that. So
Nope.
it was,
And you got buy-in pretty easily from everybody?
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Yep.
Good. So let me ask you another question. Did you know how long you were being force held for? And did that
2
plan-
hours.
Okay, so you knew you were
Chief
out of there in 2
Carpenter was
hours.
coming in at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
So I knew what was going on, but they had called us, it was 7:30. We
Okay.
were out there for a good hour and a half before Chief Carpenter showed up on scene.
All right. Is this a point where we should get Chief Carpenter on the line?
We can try, have him call in, but we can keep on talking while we're waiting for him to call in, if he can call in.
He's definitely on the chat.
Okay, if you guys can figure it out technology-wise, and I'm sure the guys in the back
There was-
can,
There
we'll
were
put
still
them on.
some conversations between Chief Bailey, Chief Reed, Paul, and myself on scene, along with them there, before Chief Carpenter got there. He got in there, everybody left but him, and then.
Gee, thanks.
So,
All right, so again, in the spirit of time, and while we're waiting for Chief Carpenter to call in, as long as we can figure that out, so we don't have dead space here. So at this point, it's Chief Bailey, Chief Hopkins, Captain Neal, Chief Reed all on the scene?
Yep.
And at
And-
that point, you're doing what? You're developing a plan going forward?
we're working through the situation and scenarios that we could do. And one of the scenarios what Chief Reed came up with was like, hey, there's a gas grill that's attached to this propane tank. Can we use that line to burn this off? Not through the grill,
No, I get
to
it.
set up the burn off machine, or the line going into the generator. So the night before, the day before, none of us caught that. Chief Reed caught it in the morning, and it was that fresh set of eyes saying, here.
He's going to call me.
He should be on.
Chief Carpenter, you on? Because if it's easier, you want to have him call my cell phone, I'll put it on speaker by the microphone.
There he is.
Okay, so out of respect for Chief Carpenter, are we at a point now where we can say, hey, you're arriving now, what's your?
We can skip ahead a little bit, and then we can come back if we have some
Okay.
discussion about that. But Chief Reed had left, Chief Bailey had left. I was just doing a pass on to Chief Carpenter about what the plan was.
Which was to just sit there and wait, right?
So we were,
Hey, can you hear me?
yes,
Yeah, can you hear us?
Hello?
Have him call my cell phone.
so the plan was to do nothing, but we had also turned around and talked about that they were going to get a tow company to pull the truck off the way they were, because the flow had significantly cut down by them. Yes, we still had some LEL around the truck and down,
Yep.
7 around the truck, and downhill had a little bit more, I believe.
Yeah, very low.
But we would, by that time, it had all blown off of this thing, so we were getting in a phase where we do that. And at one point, the discussion at that point was, we're going to turn this over to Suburban Propane and the homeowners. We're going to stay on scene to assist.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, if you don't mind hanging tight for another minute or so while Chief Hopkins finishes, then I'm going to come right to you. You okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
So we were going to be in assistance.
Good.
An assistance mode and let them handle everything else. The homeowner took responsibility and the Suburban Propane took responsibility for this thing. And we were not going to tell them how to pull the truck off. We were there with an engine company to protect exposure, protect them if need be.
That was our only point.
That was the point that Chief Bailey wanted to make sure that we were there for. Chief Carpenter stayed on the scene to be the command of that whole thing. We were sitting back as a supportive role. And so then he showed up. I did a face-to-face. I rolled out, and it's him.
All right, Chief Carpenter, can you hear me?
You're on mute.
Chief Carpenter, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so just to make things easy, I'm not sure if you heard or not, so I'm just going to assume you didn't. We just got to a point where Chief Hopkins passed the scene to you, and you took over. So if you wouldn't mind giving us a few minutes of your time, we appreciate you calling in and letting us know at that point what was on your mind. You knew the plan was, what was on your mind, and what plan did you have going forward?
So after I got there, I did the face-to-face with Chief Hopkins. There were some discussions with Chief Bailey, Chief Reed, and then safety, right? So once they all left, Paul and I basically teamed up and started talking about what we were going to do moving forward. So part of that process was that, we knew that tank had been leaking the day before and overnight. Paul, do you remember? I don't recall. Was it even making a noise when I came in?
No noise.
So yeah. So, the situation had changed from when I got there and when they had gotten there. So, probably a good amount of that product leaked out of the tank. So our plan was to discuss with Suburban Propane and Paul as being safety, what our next steps were. And I recall our first step was to figure out if we can flare off whatever remaining product was left in the tank. And if that didn't work, then come up with a plan using a tow truck to remove the truck off of the dome pipes.
Okay. And then going forward,
How did
So once we talked with Paul, basically what we did was, phase one, plan one was let's see if Suburban Propane can flare this off on the propane generator side. Had a discussion with all the units on the scene that's our first plan was to support Suburban Propane to see if they can flare that off. And Paul, am I getting ahead, Paul, or do you want me? Is this where I can tell them that by the time that guy jumped in there and replaced the valve, that they didn't have any vapors?
Nope, you're right on track. Yep, keep going.
Yeah. So while Suburban Propane was doing their thing, checking to see if they could burn off the product using the flare kit, the tech cut into or removed the valve to apply something and then noticed that there was no vapors coming off of the pipe and came to Paul and I and the main Suburban Propane guy and said, hey, listen, excuse me, there are barely any vapors coming off of this thing. Probably lost most of the product overnight. What kind of discussion should we have now about what to do moving forward? Still on target, Paul?
is he still on target?
Yes. Yep.
He said yep.
All right, good deal. After that, there wasn't any value in flaring off because there wasn't enough pressure in the tank to do that. So Paul and I had two thoughts along those lines, right? That one, the volume of the product had just leaked overnight. The second thing was maybe the service line run into they wanted to flare off. Could have been damaged when the vehicle struck the dome at the top if it shifted underground. So we weren't 100% certain, but we were leaning in the direction that a majority of the product had leaked off. So then we were left really with no other option than plan B, which was to wait for a tow truck to pull the truck off of the tank to expose the tank valves to see if Suburban Propane can control the leak at the top of the dome.
So at this point, was there any hazmat costs when the guy said, I don't smell anything, it's probably leaked off? Did we get some comfort collaboration with hazmat on that point or no?
So no hazmat was there. So our meters were about 7% LEL, but it was shifting. We did a check all around, down below, everywhere, and we figured we're out of product pretty much. So that point going forward was, as Chief Hopkins said, we talked with Suburban Propane guys. Now we're in a support role. And that support role was we don't still want to have anything that can create a spark or nothing like that. So they were comfortable with now looking at towing this thing off.
They, Suburban Propane.
Suburban Propane and the tow truck driver who got there. And he brought a big heavy, which was like thumbs up. So, and we all came up with a plan, and I'll let Chief go on.
So Captain Neal just got to the point where everyone was happy with the plan to tow, and the large-size tow truck arrived on the scene.
Yeah, so at that point, the tow truck driver, we updated him and briefed him on what we had, that our thought process was that a majority of the product had escaped the tank, and that the only option was to pull the truck off. Suburban was good with it. Captain Neal and I were good with it based on readings all around the truck and the valve, and the tow truck driver was good with it. So what we envisioned was we came up with a plan, right? The tow truck driver parked on the Delta side of the building. He backed all the way down to the edge of the driveway, did a change of direction. Oh, there's a picture. Yeah, did a change of direction off of a tree going toward the truck so that we didn't have to place anybody in the area of the truck when we were going to initiate the towing operation, right? He hooked up to the tow straps with some Jesus.
Beep. You all right?
A non-metal
in,
with webbing, right?
Hold on a second.
Yeah, the strapping.
The strapping.
I hooked up to the tow straps to the change of direction before we initiated any operations. All right, we had a few people on scene, 3122's ambulance, the tow truck company, and safety, and we had a little powwow that this was the plan. We're going to tow using the change of direction. Captain Neal was metering around the area. We wanted to have firefighters geared up and full PPE with a hand line, still out of the way, but available should that thing light off. To apply water. We had the EMS team with their stretcher and all the EMS gear in the cold zone should something happen and someone get injured. They were outside the cold zone and able to provide care if they were brought in victims. And then Captain Neal put all his gear on, went down to the bottom of the hill so he could have a set of eyes from the bottom of the hill up. I stayed in the driveway area. We stayed in communication over the radio and initiated the plan. They were able to tow the truck off without any issues, and Captain Neal can talk about Suburban Propane's, look at the dome if he wants.
At this point, do you want to hang up or do you want to stay on? Is there anything else for you?
I can stay on if there are any other questions.
Okay, So our directors say that unless you want to stay on, we don't need you, and we really appreciate you hopping on, seeing that you don't feel too well.
Copy that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Feel better.
Appreciate it.
All right, so let me clarify about our readings too. Ray and I were just talking about this. So we had initial 7%, but as the wind was shifting, because you see there in the back, the way the wind shifted, it brought it up to us, and then it moved it. We metered every time we went down there. When they were putting the straps on, they were in no hazard LEL in that area because it was pushing off to the side. So once we removed the truck, it was done. Suburban Propane walked down, and what they found was the actual relief valve was gone. So
sheared off
completely. So from that point on, we said, hey, do you need us for anything else? They're like, nope, we got it from here. We did a hot wash afterwards. Everybody got together. We talked about what happened. A lot of good things. The fellows from 31 were right on point with just being in tune to what was going on. We prepared with, the hose line, as the chief carpenter said, just having a standby. That's what Suburban Propane asked for. Again, we were in a support role, not as the driving force here. So, and that's what we looked at. So once we were done, they were like, hey, you guys are good to go. So we were finished.
Question.
This is my question. What were some of the talking points during the hot wash, just out of curiosity?
So communication, making sure everybody was aware of what was going on. Everybody was in tune to what our hazard was. What were we dealing with was right proximity of the vehicle. If we did have some kind of spark, what were we going to react to? How were we going to handle that fire suppression or even rescue? But just having everybody in the right positions, stage away, those were some of the things we talked about there. And the questions came up, in the hot wash about, with Suburban Propane driving this, because we're not used to that. We're used to the ones being in charge of everything. Well, now we're in a support role. And a couple guys were like, hey, do we really need to be here? I think so, because Suburban Propane asked for us, but they were more comfort, as the senior tech said, But it was a different role for us.
Who hooked the truck up to the straps? Was it Suburban Propane or was it the tow truck guy?
So we were there in a suppression role.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Lamb was there, and it was both of them. It was Suburban Propane Tech and the tow truck driver that kind of went down there. But they had the tow strap, not the metal or anything like that, and they hit the hooks on the vehicle because it was a pickup truck, and then they were in a safe area. But as that was going on, we monitored that. So.
Okay, so can you tell me, I'm putting you on the spot, one of you guys, from the time of dispatch to the time that the hot wash ended, how many hours was that?
So 1:30 to what time were you guys done?
Oh, I'm sorry, you guys left at whatever time at night.
We left around 10 o'clock at night.
And you went back at?
7:30ish.
So what time did?
I think we were done before noon.
Okay, so still a fair amount of time to be there.
5 hours.
Yeah. So in the spirit of time, we have less than 10 minutes left. So I want to say a couple things and then ask a couple questions. I don't think any of us expected how this one was going to go, but I thought there was a lot of valuable information passed on. So I want to first acknowledge what Captain Sanchez said earlier. Don't underestimate the danger of the propane, right? And that's why I, again, pushed the button a little bit. Hey, man, what about the gas grill propane? I thought there was a lot of valuable information passed on, Ray, so thank you. So what I want to do is start with, I guess I'll just start with Mike. We'll go down the line. What's the most valuable lesson you learned on the event, and what would you personally have done differently, if anything at all?
Yeah.
Is that fair enough?
So the most valuable thing, I think, was the communication between all the players, all the stakeholders on the scene in the beginning on the first day. That was the most, safety can sometimes, safety was involved from the beginning, right? So that added value to the command staff, so that was good. And because we did nothing and we came to the determination not to do anything, I wouldn't have done anything different on day one at all.
That's pretty powerful to say that, so good.
So there was a comment that Gary had made when we first did our face-to-face together, and basically when we made the decision not to really engage, he said, I'm glad to hear you say that, because, from the safety standpoint and, committing personnel. But, looking back, if I've learned lessons and stuff like this, it's like, I'm going to, hate to say it, but the MDE guy wanted to get under there, have us lift the car 4 inches, and he said he could have turned a knob and stopped this whole thing. So what stopped us from doing that was that we'd have to commit personnel to raise it. But second to that, he wasn't going to turn a knob. It was a shared relief valve.
Right.
So we would have committed our personnel. They would have gone in and done something for naught, even though this individual said it. And that may be what he sees. I'm not belittling him. I'm not saying he doesn't know what he's doing. But from our standpoint, because we're in charge of the scene, we have to take some of that, that responsibility to be able to say, no, you're not going to do that. And sometimes that's very hard. I mean, these guys do it all the time because he really needs safety. But anyway, they do it all the time. But that's the hard thing, to take that stance. And I think we did, but and I'll stop because I go, but.
And Ray was kidding about the safety part.
I was kidding, yes. No, the communications that we had together, from the command down to all the way back and forth, we played options. We played what if. We did whatever. We exhausted it, and we came up with the same answer. And we didn't do nothing. We got the subject matter experts there. We notified our staff of what was going on. We got the help we needed.
That's a great point. You didn't do nothing.
Right. And
You did what the appropriate.
Yeah.
We were deliberate in our action.
Perfect.
Yeah. And nobody got hurt.
Yep.
So successful.
So, the thing I learned most from it would be the way we were able to get more voices involved. Usually, we don't. On fire rounds, it's immediate action. It's two chiefs working together to get those things going, taking information in, putting information out, and communicating that way. This is one of those ones where we could sit there and really discuss all of our options before having to make a choice or not make a choice. And though not making a choice is an action because of that, what we just talked about. Going to the next day where I had a safety officer look at me and say, well, no, we're not doing that. Okay, let's talk about that. Right, we weren't on scene yet. We had, the no came in the office, not on scene. We were going to go out there and look at these things. Some of the things I wish I'd done differently was, like I said earlier, is that I had a very informal command. I wish I would have formulated command. If I don't have to announce it on the radio, but at least get in the car and run through all those things and write everything down. I didn't do any writing. It was all just conversation. What about this? What about that? How do we do it this way? Do we think about this? Zones. Chief Carpenter set it up. Those were not set up when I was there, and we should have done those things. At least establish the hot zone, the warm zone, and say we're not entering those locations without proper PPE to do the metering that we need to do. But in the end, it is that communication. And when you have the time to communicate with the players involved, to talk things out, to talk through scenarios, is the most important part of this thing here. So.
I'd submit that I wouldn't kick yourself because the win, I don't know how you'd have set it up, because you could have gone right up to the car at certain points and not gotten anything on your meter.
But the fact that he said that, it gives all of the command staff out there something to think about and put in their toolbox for next time.
Right, so that was going to be my point.
And as a command officer, right, we all have a routine.
Yep.
Right? And by him not establishing command, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief Hopkins.
I didn't get my routine. I didn't do my normal.
That threw you off, correct?
Yeah. And so I don't know if it threw me off as much as I just didn't get my brain into that command presence where I'm like, I need to establish this stuff and do the things I do. I didn't walk through. I'm established command in my vehicle, stationary command post on site. When you don't do that, and it's the same thing I tell my officers when I'm at their station. If I'm at Station 8 today and we run a box right there, the officer is told by me, run through your whole thing. Run through your on-scene report and your SIR. And I'm not going to talk unless I have to, so that they don't get thrown out of their routine. And that's where I didn't get into the routine, and I wish I would have. Hindsight being 20/20, at least sat down and wrote those things out and said, here are all our scenarios and what I need to do next.
Yep.
And the absence, just to support that, just real quick, if you don't have those readings, you can still establish a hot, warm, cold zone. So, basically just say it's going to be right here for now until it changes or whatever, but you can still establish that.
And
just a safety factor.
We look at zones as a circle, right? Mm-hmm. This was more of a cone. Like that's going anything downwind from here, spreading out will be the hot zone, and it's a very large hot zone. But as we walk farther back, that cone gets smaller, and where we were standing, we were in the cold zone, even though we were only 50, 75 feet away.
That's a good way to articulate
it. Yep.
Perfect. Paul, what do you got?
So I think your ERG is your friend too, because in the green section, it gives you that distance downwind, stuff like that. Just another tool in your toolbox. Remember, that's the first 15 minutes of any incident, get you started. So for command officers, looking at that. For us, safety is not necessarily dispatched on a lot of things, pretty much nothing. We listen up, we get notified via either the countywide, network or whatever. But if you run into an instance where you go, man, this is we're your eyes and ears for the incident commander, for anybody really. And our job is to look at a bigger picture, to look at that risk versus benefit kind of thing. And we're looking at, and everything in our brains are going, what if, that little Tourette, whatever, going on. But that's what we do. So I would say we're a vital part of command. Sometimes we don't get utilized, we get overlooked. But I think in this instance, we all work together, and we all communicated. When I say no, I look at things, and I know you and I had that conversation about no, and it wasn't so much towards you, it was to this incident. And the great pass on I got from Mike about this whole thing was like, whoa, what are we doing here? So as this developed and unfolded for the next day, we looked at a lot of things a lot harder. And I'll tell you what, Chief Bailey, when he showed up and he really talked to these Suburban Propane guys, and one of the things that really caught me was he explained it to the guy about how can I explain to the parents or the people of the burn firefighters from this incident? And the guy was like, ooh, okay, I get it now. Just lifting the car and things like that for little things that you're looking at and what we're looking at. So huge thing there.
So I want to, and I'm speaking for myself, but I think I speak for all command officers. You saying no didn't hurt my feelings. I really don't have feelings, but your no is part of that whole toolbox that we got to talk about. So we don't take it personally. I don't think the ones that are here don't take that personally. You saying no to something doesn't mean that you're saying no to me. You're saying no to what my idea was, and then we move on to the next idea. Or we argue the idea that I have, and then in the end I might win out or you might win out. But so please don't think that as safety officers and the fill-in safety officers and the ones that are here, that you saying no or you getting in our faces about something doesn't mean we're going to take it personally. I'm going to walk out and do the same thing I did the day before.
And real quick point, Paul, you just transmitted a lesson that I don't think people picked up on or you realize you transmitted. If we run a call, any of us, from, it doesn't matter from where, if we run a call and there's something questionable about the environment or the hazard or the safety of our personnel on the scene, call you, you'd be happy to come out and be a second set of eyes and ears, right?
That was my intent.
Yeah, so thank you for that. Guys, I thought this was excellent. I thought there was a lot of good stuff that came out of this conversation that wasn't out in the street, but is now. So, and it provides all of us that weren't there tools for our toolbox for the next one. All right. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Chief Gibson so he can close us out.
All righty. Thank you, guys. That was some great stuff, some great conversation about propane and some hazardous materials. Hopefully everybody took a bunch out of it. I know I did. So this pretty much concludes our 2022 season for our episodes. Big shout out and thank you to the media guys, right? It takes a lot to make this stuff go, right? These guys spend a lot of hours setting this stuff up, and after the episode is done, breaking this stuff down and putting the command lab back where it belongs. And big shout out to the, Petrarca, Collins, all those guys back there that really make this this all happen. So with that being said, the 2023 season will begin in January. We have 3 current episodes scheduled for 2023. The first one will be January 11th, and we're going to discuss the plane crash that took place just up the street from here in Company 28's area. January 19th, we are going to have Captain Wheeler and some of the battery guys back to talk about acquired structure training and to wrap up some stuff about the ion batteries, right? Some more discussion about that. And then on January 24th, we have the crew from Company 8 and some other folks and the command officers coming up to talk about the gas explosion that took place in Gaithersburg, So that's the next couple of episodes. And in talking to Captain Miller and Chief Davis, it sounds like we have a lot of opportunities to talk about some special operations type of events and talking to these guys and talking about ion batteries. So look out for something maybe in February where we bring in all of the special operations guys, hazmat, water, all of those folks in here to educate us on some of that stuff that we don't run all the time. So with that, happy holidays. Thank you guys for participating. We couldn't do, this is all for you guys. So hopefully any feedback that you guys have or any ideas that you may have, please reach out to either myself, Captain Miller, or Chief Davis. We'll be glad to entertain your suggestions. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next year.
Thank you.